You're bleeding respect with every word you speak, every justification, every excuse, every explanation. You think you're building trust, you're actually broadcasting weakness, and they can smell it. Listen closely. Every time you explain yourself without being asked, you create what psychologists call a covert contract. You're negotiating for approval you should already command. You're presenting evidence for a trial that isn't happening, and the judges you're appealing to, they're taking notes on your insecurity. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. In The Prince, he wrote about leaders who justified their actions to subordinates. They didn't last, because explanation without request is confession without crime. Here's the psychological truth they don't teach you. Humans respect certainty. We follow those who move with sovereign conviction. But when you over-explain, you introduce doubt into the equation. You're essentially saying, I'm not sure I have the right to do this. And the moment you say that, neither is anyone else. Your compulsion to explain yourself isn't kindness. It isn't transparency. It's a strategic error that costs you respect, authority, and social positioning. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to learn 7 principles that will fundamentally alter how people perceive you. 1. The sovereignty principle and why certainty creates compliance. 2. How information asymmetry functions as social currency. 3. The predator silence technique wolves use to maintain hierarchy. 4. Why justification patterns trigger contempt in human neurology. 5. The surgical edit, cutting explanations by 70%. 6. Strategic disclosure timing that builds mystique instead of familiarity. 7. The counter-interrogation framework that flips power dynamics. Stay until principle 6. That's where most people fail the transition from theory to execution. Let's begin. You're not a republic. You're a monarchy. Act like it. Sovereignty means your actions don't require external validation. When a king issues a decree, does he explain his reasoning to every peasant? Number. The decree exists because he willed it. That's the explanation. Now translate this to your life. When you make a decision, any decision, that decision carries its own authority. The moment you append justifications, you're asking permission retroactively. You're putting your sovereignty up for democratic vote. Machiavelli wrote, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see, but few can understand what you truly are. They're watching your certainty level, not your reasoning quality. Cognitive mechanism. The human brain interprets explanation seeking as status negotiation. When you explain without prompting, you position yourself as the lower status party, seeking approval from the higher status judge. This happens in milliseconds beneath conscious awareness. Do this immediately. Make your next decision and announce it. Period. No supporting documentation. When someone questions you, pause 3 seconds before responding. Let the silence do the work. Replace because with periods. I'm not attending instead of I'm not attending, because traffic and also my schedule. And honestly, it's complicated. Track your explanation count for 1 day. You'll be horrified. Ask yourself this question. If you truly believed you had the right to do what you're doing, would you explain it? That's the sovereignty test. But sovereignty alone isn't enough. You need to control the information battlefield. That's principle 2. Knowledge is leverage. Explanation is leakage. In military strategy, there's a concept called information superiority. The side that knows more while revealing less wins the engagement. Every conversation is an intelligence operation. You're either gaining information or hemorrhaging it. When you over-explain, you're giving away your decision-making process, your values, your pressure points, your insecurities. You're essentially handing potential adversaries a manual on how to manipulate you. Watch how apex predators operate. The lion doesn't explain to the hyena why it's claiming a territory. It marks the boundary and enforces it. The explanation is embedded in the action itself. Machiavelli observed, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Strategic ambiguity creates that separation. Explanation collapses it. Psychological principle. Information asymmetry creates perceived status differential. The person who knows more holds social authority. When you volunteer your reasoning, motivations, and processes, you eliminate that differential. You're putting yourself on equal footing with people who should be operating from a knowledge deficit relative to you. Implement these immediately. Answer questions with the minimum viable information, not the maximum. Practice the phrase, "That's my decision." Let it stand alone. When pressed, redirect with questions. Why do you ask? Shifts the interrogation. Create strategic silence zones. Not every statement deserves a response. Count to 3 right now. Think of the last time you over-explained yourself. What information did you give away? What did it cost you? And you're starting to see the pattern, but there's a specific behavioral technique that seals this framework. It's how wolves maintain pack hierarchy without violence. Silence is the most violent response to disrespect. Watch wolves. When a subordinate challenges the alpha doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't justify. There's a stare, a positioning, and absolute silence. The message is clear. Your opinion doesn't warrant acknowledgement. Humans are the same animal with better masks. When you explain yourself to someone who disrespects you, you're telling them their challenge is valid. You're engaging in a status negotiation you've already lost by participating. The paradox: silence communicates more authority than 1,000 words of justification. Here's the neurological reality. When you remain silent in response to a challenge, the other person's brain experiences cognitive dissonance. They expected engagement, expected defense. The absence creates psychological tension that they must resolve internally, usually by adjusting their perception of your status upward. Machiavelli understood this. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. If you're explaining yourself to fools, you've already told everyone who's actually in charge. Deploy these weapons. Next time someone demands an explanation you don't owe, say nothing, watch them squirm. Master the 3-second pause before responding to any challenge. Count it. 1, 2, 3. Replace defensive paragraphs with "noted," then move on. Train your facial expressions. Neutral is more threatening than anger. Ask yourself, what does your immediate defensiveness actually reveal about your self-perception? Now we're getting surgical, because there's a specific neural mechanism that makes justification trigger contempt. Once you understand this, you'll never over-explain again. Justification activates disgust pathways in the observer's brain. This is neuroscience, not philosophy. Studies on social hierarchies show that over-justification triggers the same neural networks associated with witnessing weakness or submission. The brain literally categorizes you as a lower status when you explain without being asked. It's an ancient circuit. When our ancestors saw someone desperately justifying their actions, it signaled submission behavior, prey behavior, and that classification sticks. Think about politicians who get caught in scandals. The ones who fall hardest aren't those who did the worst things. They're the ones who kept explaining, kept justifying, kept presenting new evidence. Each explanation confirmed guilt in the public's neural circuitry. Contrast that with those who simply stated their position and moved on. The brain can't process unapologetic certainty as submission. It defaults to respect, even when it disagrees. Robert Greene writes in The 48 Laws of Power, when you are trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear. Each word of explanation dilutes your authority. The mechanism: your brain stem evaluates confidence through behavioral consistency. When your words and your frame alignment match, you register as authentic and high status. When you flood the zone with explanations, your frame wobbles. The observer's brain detects the incongruence and classifies you as untrustworthy or weak. Execute this protocol. Audit your last 10 text messages. Count the justifications. Cut them by 70%. Practice the power phrase, "That works for me." No elaboration. When you feel the urge to explain, substitute with a question. What specifically concerns you? Record yourself speaking for 5 minutes. Listen for justification patterns. They're everywhere. Here's the brutal truth. You're not explaining yourself to inform. You're explaining yourself to manage their perception of you. That's manipulation disguised as transparency. So how do you actually cut the explanations without creating conflict? That's the surgical edit. Principle 5. Precision cuts respect more than volume persuades. Here's the formula. Reduce your explanation by 70%, not 60, not 50, 70. Most people's explanations contain 90% emotional management and 10% actual information. You're managing their potential disappointment, their potential judgment, their potential rejection. You're doing emotional labor they didn't request and don't respect. The surgical edit strips that away. You deliver the minimum information required for functional communication, nothing more. Example, bloated. I can't make dinner Friday because I have this work thing that came up unexpectedly and I really tried to move it, but my boss needs this report and honestly I feel terrible about it, but maybe we can reschedule for next week. Surgical. I can't make Friday. How's next week? See the difference? One version bleeds status, the other maintains sovereignty. Machiavelli advised, never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. The deception here is simple. Appear unmoved by their judgment. This isn't lying, it's strategic framing. Psychological principle. The human brain assigns value based on scarcity. When you ration your words, those words carry more weight. When you flood the market with explanations, you've inflated your verbal currency into worthlessness. Implement immediately. Write your next difficult message, then delete half of it, then delete half again. Replace paragraphs with single sentences. Can't make it. Locked in elsewhere. Use periods where you're tempted to use commas. Force yourself to stop. Practice verbal minimalism for one full day. Track the reactions. They'll be dramatic. Try this. Next time someone asks why you did something, respond with, "It was the right call." Then stop talking. Stop talking. Watch what happens, but timing matters because there's a strategic moment when disclosure actually builds mystique instead of destroying it. Most people miss this entirely. Speak after the results, not before. Foxes hunt in silence. They don't announce their strategy to the hen house. You shouldn't either. Here's where most people destroy themselves. They explain their plans, their processes, their thinking before any results exist. They're seeking preemptive validation. And in doing so, they invite preemptive judgment. The strategic operator flips this. Execute first, produce results, then, if necessary, provide context. But even then, sparingly. Why does this work? Because results create social proof. Once something succeeds, your process becomes genius strategy. Before it succeeds, the same process is risky stupidity. The actions are identical. The timing changes everything. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. They judge your explanations based on outcomes they've already witnessed, not logic they're currently processing." The mechanism, this is what psychologists call the halo effect. Positive results create a cognitive bias that makes people retroactively assign intelligence, competence, and authority to your previous actions. Explain before results, and you're defending against skepticism. Explain after results, and you're teaching from authority. Use this framework. Announce decisions, not deliberations. I'm doing X, not I'm thinking about X. Share results, not processes. Show the finished product, not the messy middle. When asked about future plans, deploy strategic vagueness. I'm exploring several options. Document your wins, then reference them when questioned. Like when I did X, this is similar territory. Ask yourself, are you explaining to inform or explaining to seek permission you don't need? That's the question that separates operators from approval seekers. Final principle. This is where theory becomes warfare because people will interrogate you. They'll push, they'll demand explanations, and you need the counter protocol. When questioned, flip the frame. Someone demands you explain yourself. This is a power move. They're attempting to position themselves as authority and you as subordinate who owes answers. Most people accept this frame and start explaining. Fatal error. The counter move. Never accept the interrogation frame. Redirect, question, or simply refuse to engage. Techniques. The mirror. Why do you need to know? Forces them to justify their question. The redirect. Interesting question. What's your take on it? Shifts burden back. The stone wall. I'm not discussing this, period. No elaboration. The minimal personal reasons, then silence. Each technique maintains your frame while denying theirs. You're not being rude. You're being sovereign. There's a difference. Sun Tzu wrote, all warfare is based on deception. Social warfare is no different. When someone demands explanation, they're attempting conquest. Your refusal to engage is defensive superiority. Psychological reality. Most interrogation is dominance testing, not information seeking. They don't actually need your explanation. They're measuring whether you'll submit to their frame. Your refusal communicates, "You don't have authority over me." That's the message that alters relationship dynamics permanently. Master these responses, white, or that's handled, then change subjects. Not up for discussion, maintain eye contact, don't break. I'm comfortable with my decision, then silence. Practice the phrase, "I don't owe you that information." Use it when true. Here's the reality. People who respect you don't interrogate you. They trust your judgment. If someone's demanding explanations, they've already decided you're subordinate. Your explanations won't change that. Only your refusal will. So where does this leave you? Let's integrate this. You walked into this video explaining yourself to everyone, bleeding status, broadcasting insecurity, hoping your justifications would build trust and respect. Now you know the truth. Every unsolicited explanation costs you power. The 7 principles we covered aren't suggestions. They're surgical protocols. 1. Sovereignty. Your decisions don't require external validation. 2. Information asymmetry. Knowledge is leverage. Explanation is leakage. 3. Predator silence. The most violent response to disrespect is none. 4. The contempt trigger. Justification activates disgust. Pathways. 5. The surgical edit. 70% reduction in verbal waste. 6. Strategic timing. Speak after results, not before 7. Counter interrogation. Never accept the questioning frame. Implement these and you'll notice something immediate. People stop questioning you, they start complying because you've communicated at the neural level. I am certain. I am sovereign. I don't negotiate my authority. But here's the consequence if you don't change. You'll spend your entire life in a courtroom of your own making, presenting evidence, appealing to judges who never appointed themselves, exhausting yourself in defense of actions you have every right to take. And you'll wonder why nobody respects you. You'll wonder why your words carry no weight. You'll wonder why people ignore your boundaries, disregard your decisions, and treat you like you're perpetually on trial. Now you know why. If this framework just reorganized how you think about communication, hit subscribe. You're going to want the next video. It's on how to use strategic silence as a weapon in negotiations. That drops Thursday. Second action. Screenshot the 7 principles. Keep them visible until they're automatic. Final action. Comment below with the phrase sovereign frame. That's your declaration. That's your commitment. That's your signal to the algorithm and to yourself that you're done explaining and started commanding. The world doesn't respect those who seek permission. It follows those who take authority.